Hello and welcome to another one of these Let's Talk episodes. If you're here for the first time, because we've had quite a few new people come to the channel, these are sort of largely improvised chats that we have just to discuss various elements of role-playing game design, with a bit of a focus looking back at the silver age of role-playing games, but also what it means in the modern context. It's all pretty low-key. You'll hopefully be able to see in the playlist that there's other ones of these. Today we are looking to explore RPG narratives and storytelling. So there were two things that kind of prompted this one. Firstly, one of the other videos, and I will leave a link to it because it's something I think is really important. I did a bit of a rundown on the storytelling used in Final Fantasy VII's opening bombing missions, the 1997-96 original, and why that was so good and is something of a lost art. And the other thing that prompted it, on the game design subreddit, somebody had posted a question as to whether branching narratives are necessary or even really helpful. You know, whether or not that is a good way to engineer an experience. So I thought, as we've done with the previous ones of these, I would take a look at the question, get some sort of core things down to talk about, and we'll improvise our way through. I've got a gin and tonic next to me to go over this. I'm sure you can have the environment that suits you. So first off, just going straight into the core concepts of things I'm talking about, because I think a lot of the time, storytelling is something that there's a lot of overlapping concepts here, but there's particular things that I mean by that, and I know that with the Final Fantasy VII video, I get a sense that people think I'm talking about the writing, and the writing is involved in it, but it's not quite the same thing. Oh, if you haven't been here before, by the way, these ugly ass Google Sheets are how we do all this. Eventually we'll hopefully upgrade it to a full-blown video. At some point I want to make these a load of video essays, but right now this is just a Twitch style let's chat. So first off, what most games come from, I'm terming this the narrative framework, and I mean by this the base concepts of what you're trying to do and the what if of your story. This is the part from which everything else will flow, or the thing that you are doing with everything else. So if I think for the base idea of the story, first off you've got a sort of tonal concept. For several games that, obviously Fire Emblem Three Houses we're in the middle of the playthrough of, and the Persona games are, ostensibly tonally anime waifu simulators. It's that kind of thing. That's the tone. Whereas something like Fallout has a much more sort of, Fallout 1 has a dark, it's not quite a horror, but it's sort of flirting at the edges of it. The concept should be sort of horrifying, but also just exciting and interesting. And And then the what ifs. I've mentioned on here, obviously the blue bits have got some sort of base example of what I'm talking about, being much more concise than my actual words. Clair Obscur, obviously a much more recent game. The concept for that there is this giant paintress who paints a number on a monolith that decrements each year, and anybody who is that age when it decrements dies. I think that's a very strong concept. Sorry, so let me just check this on the phone. Yeah. Apologies, life does get in the way. Yeah, so all these things, and another one that I really like, that's not actually an RPG, it's just a film, but you can have a sort of core subtext that you're trying to push. And I didn't want to push this for any of the games, because I don't want to spoil things for anyone. I'm trying to avoid spoilers through this. But the film Jurassic Park, the very first Jurassic Park, I'm not going to speak about Michael Crichton's book, but the Spielberg film is the entire thing a hammered home allegory for being ready for parenthood, and that's one of the reasons why it's good, and why a lot of the other Jurassic Parks are nothing films, because those films are about dinosaurs, whereas the original Jurassic Park is dealing with quite a strong and emotive subject matter, and it's being explored through dinosaurs. So it's you can have something like that going on, and that'll form your narrative framework. And some of the games that we'll look at on the channel start with incredibly strong narrative frameworks. Then there's the writing itself. Now, when I'm talking about the writing, I mean that mostly the literal written or spoken words within it, and this is all basically about whether that is interesting, well executed, and believable in whatever context it's in. So something like this, obviously it stems from the tonal framework that you've set. If you're making an anime game based off I don't know, like Cowboy Bebop, it doesn't need to have the writing of a Ken Loach film. It's going for something stylistic, and I think with things like that, there's you can in those things, you can do things where you might not be going for realism, but you might be going for hyper-realism. One of my personal favourite, I'm not big on watching anime, but I have seen some, and get to this point without having seen some. And I think that something like Bocce the Rock is really, really, from an having lived some of those lives, I think that's a case of hyper-realism, where it's fantastical ways of exploring very solid real life things. I think the writing in that is nothing short of phenomenal. That's as an ex-psychiatric nurse, I really do think it's quite clever, but it's not necessarily again like this sort of Ken Loach grounded in reality thing. And also with the writing, this can be sort of smaller concepts of when I think about Planescape Torment, and we will be talking about Planescape later. The overarching concepts of the narrative framework are the Nameless One and the world of Planescape and Sigil, which are interesting within themselves. It's an interesting place to explore this one idea of the Nameless One and everything that comes with him. But in terms of the writing, it's not just how that is executed in terms of him and that narrative, it's also sort of side elements. So someone like, again, one of my favourite characters in video games, A Fall from Grace, is like, that's part of the excellent writing there. But the writing, and this has been, this is where the Final Fantasy VII video came in, is not the same as the storytelling. It's about how you are conveying the meaning of your narrative. It is the tools that you use. In the Final Fantasy VII opening 20 minutes analysis, I talk a lot about the reason why that's so damned good is it's got genuine cinematography, short punchy dialogue, and integrated emotional music, integrated musical storytelling, where the story is being dictated by the music. Now, that isn't the only way that you can tell a story. There are lots of different tools that are available, but I think whether or not you can sort of show, don't tell, is the kind of the difference here. So yeah, dialogue systems, that this used to be when I was younger, as I'm sure anybody who played the original Fallout and its sequel at the time will tell you that dialogue systems have been something that hasn't really felt like it's improved much since Fallout 1 came out, and has often fallen by the wayside, and we've had some pretty ropey alternatives. But what I'm kind of thinking about in terms of this is when you, the player, are going to tell your player character to speak to someone in the world, how much control over that do you have? Is there a system? Classically, we talk about dialogue trees, and they will come in varying different levels of complexity, which we'll talk about later. There was a trend which I thankfully has now seemed to have died, and really hope it's not still there, of the dialogue wheel, whereby Mass Effect, the original one, which is, as I say, is a sort of shooter with RPG elements, won't get covered on the channel, but it famously had this Paragon, Normal and Renegade option, which again, very frustrating if you played the original Fallout. And there was a meme back in the day where somebody's asking Commander Shepard, "Hey Shepard, can I punch you in the dick?" And the three options are sure, yes, and only a little, because it's about the false creation of the false what's the word? The implication that your choices matter, but really they kind of don't within the dialogue. There's also, as well as part of this, I mean, even worse than those dialogue wheels, in my opinion, were the old parser systems, which parsers basically where you type in words, and your character will then ask about that to the NPC they're talking to. I have included time dialogues. You don't see it very often. The series that again, it's not an RPG, but I think it's one of the few sets of games or series of games where it feels like there has been like some level of improvement or just development, progress since Fallout 1, which was the Walking Dead games, or Telltale more generally. I only played the first season of Walking Dead, but I liked that, and I thought that the time dialogues in that were an interesting device. And then the derived systems that's mentioned in blue there. When I talk about that, I mean things like maybe like you've got that Paragon Renegade system where like you get more points if you stick to a given style of answering, or if there are clear markers that if you ask this you will be using this skill, or you will get this experience if you ask this, as in the game, literally advertising that in the dialogue system. Are there things hidden behind the scenes? Branching narratives, it's basically anything whereby the story is not linear, and whereby things can happen that are exclusive to one playthrough or one option or another. Like the extent to which there is a branching narrative can be, there are some games. I mean, it's quite hard to judge a game like Fallout 1 or Fallout 2 particularly on whether or not it has a branching narrative, because this is just almost entirely open. There's sequences of the story that will happen, but almost everything in between you've got a ton of options in. On the other hand, there are games like Fire Emblem Three Houses, where decisions you make on one playthrough will completely lock you out of other things in that playthrough. And even some of the more linear JRPGs have got sections that are different each time. So that's basically what we're talking about there. And lastly, just to mention it, and we're not going to go into this one in too much detail because it really the player story is almost what all the other videos come to represent, but there is the concept of the character story and the player story. And the player story is literally the journey emotionally that the player has playing it, and that player story applies just as much to Final Fantasy VII as it does to FIFA or whatever. Like what was your experience playing it? How did you get better? How did you come to discover the world? What was your understanding? What did you feel playing it? And ultimately, I feel that you should be thinking about the story that the player is going to experience. It doesn't mean that you have to leave no wiggle room, because sometimes you can engineer. I mean, again, Fallout and its sequel engineer fantastic experiences while being non-linear. And there's a lot of linear games out there that I've got very poor player experiences, very poor player stories. But it is about sort of considering that, and that really, the narratives and storytelling, which is what we're talking about today. That's just one component of that. Like the going right down to how you design your level up system, where's your armor, where do you put things, where do you allow the player to go, that all factors in. I've modelled this talk on the last one. It's using quite similar settings on the sheet. So last time we did a what games do this well. I haven't got the full tier list in front of me this time. Maybe I can put it in now as a sort of put it in post. But I've chosen, it's mostly the same games as last time. I've put in a few slightly different ones because I wanted to speak about them particularly. A lot of this obviously is subjective, but again, if we are going to try and pick apart these things, we need to sort of set some level of standard of how we feel these games did, if we're going to pick the best parts from them and make the best games. If you find, I would hope that you don't find my takes on this to be, wildly in opposition to your own. But if there are slight differences, maybe you let that inform them, but still look at these things the same way. So broadly, I grouped these this time. I've left the tier ranking in because I think that's more. Apologies to Baldur's Gate 3 last time. I had put that as a C tier game. It's not C tier, it's in the B tier. So that was a typo. Firstly, the open world aspect of it, to what extent you can sort of go anywhere at any time. That was not necessarily the easiest thing to categorize with a lot of these, as we shall see. Then sort of trying to put value judgments on the quality of the narrative framework, the quality of the writing, the quality of the storytelling, and then talking about the dialogue systems. I guess we'll go through and we'll just pick out a few, and we can see. So, Final Fantasy VII, again, avoiding spoilers through all of this. Whenever I say Final Fantasy VII, I mean the original. I'll list it as remake if I mean remake, but I'm not going to be listing those. Has it got an open world? Only mildly. Most of the time, you are going to things in a pretty linear order. There are, some places that you can go to that you do not have to go to. There are some characters that you can recruit that you do not have to recruit. But in general, while it's probably to me it's slightly more open than a lot of its PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 JRPG kin, it is still a pretty linear experience. I think it's got a really solid narrative framework. I think it sets itself up very well in terms of the story it has and what themes it's exploring. I think that the writing it's okay. It's not that it's not Dostoevsky, and nor should it be, but it handles most of it itself well. I think that it's the storytelling and the narrative framework that are doing the heavy lifting. I think the writing kind of just threads in between. Again, I talked before about short, punchy dialogue in Final Fantasy VII. To me, I would include that more as a storytelling device than how we're picking on the writing. And then in the dialogue system, the overwhelming majority of it, there's no choice on offer. The characters are just speaking sort of independently. What it does that I really quite like is that there are one or two, not many, but one or two aspects within the game that have the dialogue has hidden impacts. And what that means is when you are choosing from a couple, one of two dialogue options, you do want to consider whether that makes any difference. So, but you don't know, and most of them don't, but some of them do. I think that's really good, as we'll come on to them. But yeah, so those hidden impacts. If we compare this to something like a let's say Baldur's Gate 2. No, it's not Baldur's Gate 2. We'll go Dragon Age Origins for simplicity. Almost all your dialogue choices that make a difference make the difference instantly and frequently, visibly, numerically. You say something and you get immediately get your relationship with Liliana goes up 4 points, your relationship with Morrigan goes down 2. And so you always see that, and there having these hidden impacts, I think, is a reasonable tool. In Baldur's Gate 2, I think that the writing there is good. As I say, mostly because obviously if you've watched the playthrough, in terms of the open world, it is open until it isn't, and then it kind of opens up again, and then it kind of doesn't. So it's mostly open world. Of all those games on that list, there's only really Morrowind that I feel is really totally open. I feel, obviously there's a main quest that you can do in Morrowind, but it accounts for so little of the actual game that's there. Even Fallout games, which I love because you can go anywhere in any order, but they funnel you more than the Elder Scrolls ones do. What do I mean with those dialogue systems? Because I guess I think I've explained quite well the writing, what I mean by that, and the storytelling. When I say highly complex trees and semi-complex trees, a dialogue tree, to me, is when you are offered, as the player, a number of different responses that are not simply good, neutral, evil, or, as I say, Mass Effect was, I think, Paragon, normal, and Renegade. A semi-complex tree is where you have different options that convey different things. So, something like, there's several example games there, but if you're, you can go somewhere and you can say that you will help this person, say that you will not help this person, say that you'll help this person if they do this, or you broker a deal or whatever, or potentially segue into a different topic. And that's kind of what I mean by a semi-complex tree. With Fallout 2 and Planescape, I really should call it Torment, but I can't get out of the habit of calling it Planescape. What you have is highly complex trees. And highly complex trees are where the pattern and pathing of the dialogue is not abundantly clear. Asking somebody about something may have unforeseen consequences, and different dialogue options may require talking about things in non-obvious orders. The writing in this, I mean, like I said once, with regards to Throne of Baal, the expansion for Baldur's Gate 2, that like it's got a really, really, really bad dialogue in that. Its dialogue system, it's a simple tree, but it's horrendous because none of the options are reasonable. Like the opening section of that, at some point we'll have to do it on the channel, because there's a lot to learn in how to not do things in Throne of Baal. Yeah. So in these games with Planescape and Fallout 2, you might find yourself talking about one thing and then end up in something completely different. What I guess how that manifests with this, Baldur's Gate 1 does it a little bit, to be fair. But Fallout 2 and Planescape are absolutely the two that do it most. Dialogue is unpredictable, and this is a major consideration when you write in dialogue. Is, do you want your dialogue to be predictable? Because on one hand, if your dialogue is very much predictable, then you are arguably losing something in the natural delivery of things. It always will feel slightly artificial. But on the other hand, if your dialogue is unpredictable, then the player may not feel like they have agency over things. And I think if you're putting in a system, then you've got to allow for a certain amount of agency. So I think that there's a lot of games in Western RPGs over the last 20 years, really, that have been quite cautious with doing it the Planescape or Fallout 2 way. I don't think it's I can see that there's reasons to not do it. I think that Fallout 2 and Planescape are probably the two games that have handled dialogue best within the genre. That's a hill I would die upon. I think that the complexity really lends something to the game. But this is just something to consider when designing these systems. I've got a couple on there, Vampire and Final Fantasy X. I'm pretty sure that Vampire had semi-complex trees. And I think 10, which I've played much more recently, I'm pretty sure that's entirely linear. I don't think there's anything being affected behind the scenes there. I think that, dialogue in that game, it can sometimes act as a menu, but that's basically it. Everything else is just the game. There's no hidden effects there. If I'm wrong, then apologies on that. Obviously, much more recently we played Fire Emblem Three Houses, which I have at several times whilst playing Fire Emblem Three Houses moaned about the storytelling and the writing. Come to think of it, you notice I gave the narrative framework a reasonable. I think it's a solid concept. I think it's a there's a reason why things like a sort of a Harry Potter or The Sims, or things like that. The development of characters, running a school and a class, and seeing progression in that. I think that is kind of like a natural thing, and also I suppose as a setting, it's something that like almost everyone's been through. So I think that it's there, and ultimately the narrative framework, the real like meat and bones of the narrative framework is just let's have like a massive anime ensemble, like and the let's have all the characters be anime, but like handling their own tropes, and I think it does that well. I think that I've always said with Fire Emblem Three Houses that like it, even though the writing can drive me up the wall, and the storytelling like just as much, I do think it evokes responses, like emotional responses, not necessarily complex ones, but it's where it's pitching, I think it does okay. And right down near the bottom of the list, we've got things like the pseudo parser and the parser. Also, I suppose, just to speak about Morrowind, there, the narrative framework. I don't really know what the narrative framework is for Morrowind, or really like Oblivion either. Like it feels like there is a main quest and a story, but it kind of feels like it exists in a different world. I don't feel like Morrowind is saying anything. I don't think that it has a what if that it particularly engages with. I don't mean, this is not, I mean, I suppose it is a criticism, but like, it's not setting out to do that sort of thing. This is more of just sort of like an open world. And then you have this relationship between the writing and the storytelling. I say a mishmash. Can't say it. Mishmash when it comes to the writing with Morrowind. There's a lot of the books that are pretty good. Like there's some pretty nice text in there, and there's a hell of a lot of them. And some of those can be can be quite well executed within the setting. Not mind blowing, not Planescape, not Disco Elysium, but they're decent. But I mean, firstly, like the dialogue, such as it is just atrocious. And the whole storytelling aspect of it. I mean, like all these, they're more world building than storytelling, but they are than like narrative, I suppose, than storytelling. More world building than narrative development. But they're ultimately they are ancillary text logs. And that, like, if your storytelling is ever requiring ancillary text logs, then like it's gone very badly wrong for you. I think that's the thing. The dialogue system itself, as I recall, you basically you have, I think you have a literal parser, but even if you don't have the literal parser, you basically select dialogue things to talk about from a drop down, and then you talk, and it just, there's very little sense that like what you're picking and choosing Yeah, like it is being conversationally expressed. You're just sort of asking about something, and the game's like, asks you to imagine how you do this. Obviously, Wizardry 8, if you've seen that playthrough, that is a salty, well, it's a partial playthrough, because I end up like giving up on it in order to spend more time with my hair. But yeah, that has a similar thing. Except, I mean, Wizardry 8's like dialogue system is should probably be banned under the Geneva Convention. It's that bad. It's like it has a pseudo parser a la Morrowind, but it turns out that the pseudo parser doesn't contain all the options that are in the parser. So it basically implies that you don't need a parser, but in fact you do. Which is just woeful. Just absolutely woeful. I guess the other thing to talk about on this page is there are a few games here that I quite like, that at a glance don't seem to be coming out terribly strong here. Might and Magic 7 is the absolute classic of this. Can you make a decent RPG with a poor narrative framework, bad writing, and horrendous storytelling? Like, well, you can make a C tier one. You can make a cult game. But, but in general, most of the ones towards the top, you are seeing strong or fairly strong or very strong up here. Yeah. Went to pick some case studies. Again, trying to avoid spoilers. Thinking about these games, I guess. A lot of these I've sort of covered on the way through. I think we've got. Sorry, I'm gonna do some typing. I say large emotional outcomes. That's irritating. What's this? 16. We do all that. Actually, we probably need all this as well. Yep. All right. Okay. So, what did we say? We said very highly complex. Dialogue trees. Morality builds. Not all dialogue available in one playthrough. Just really strong writing, if a bit indulgent. I always have to put that caveat in with Planescape, because it is a bit. Alright, number 3, houses. Excuse me. Most dialogue is fluff flavor, if that. I guess I'm gonna put in a little thing on. Some choices matter a lot. I'm gonna say necessitates multiple playthroughs, because it does. And then we had highly complex dialogue trees, very open world, morality builds, independent of of systems, most systems. I guess that's thinking mostly within the dialogue trees, and we should caveat that up there. Few small. So yeah, what I mean, I've put that in there, but really, let's shift it down one. In fact, actually, what I really want to do is that. Fantastic. Sorry, it looks awful for now, but it will matter. We'll go. So, tone, anime, audience, play. 12 plus. And I guess is emotional the word I'm looking for? I've been using emotional a lot, and perhaps. Do you know what? I might even just. It's like, because what I mean by that is like, are you trying to be invested in the characters' emotions as they go through and feel, you know, I guess like happy and sad for them. You know, if we come down to the tone of Fallout 2, I to me, I don't know if you're going to agree with this. I think that there's I don't know, like it's a almost like a. It's not horror per se, but it's got like these like horrific elements to it. Horror comedy. Is that even really expressing it? Yeah. I think the audience for Fallout 1 is a little older. There's a certain bit in it which is designed to provoke a reaction. I would say that the reaction is pitching at. I was going to say no. Is more to do with it's more of a creation of a feeling of anger, of resentment towards the antagonists, more than anything else. let me qualify that. Because I think that, like, it is... just realised that we haven't capitalised that. I always do tons of these, so I'm sure we'll have more before the end. Yeah, the tone of Planescape. Like, it's... maybe we talk as well about the audience. I think that the audience is slightly older, but not much older than that of Final Fantasy VII. I don't think it's pitched at kids, but I think it is. It's not as it's not seeking to sort of exclude. It's not pitching. It's not like the Fallout 2 is a bit cultural referencey, and you look at the cultural references of Fallout 2, and most of them, I think, are pitching at a slightly older audience. To say nothing of the obvious violence that gave the game its certification back in the day. Does it have emo storytelling? Like telling. I think yes. Your mileage may vary. I'm not going to go into depth on that as to why. Go and play the game. It's certainly not. It's not quite. What's the word? Final Fantasy VII is as much about anything else. It's about the experience of adolescence, really. It's a lot of, like, the core concepts in that game are explorations of the many facets of adolescence. It's not just targeted at that, it's exploring it. And I don't think that Planescape is shooting at that. So to say emo storytelling feels a bit hard, but it does seek to create a reaction, like you do, or I did. I felt for the Nameless One and the people he has known. I was invested in them more than I was invested in any NPC in Fallout 2. But I wasn't so invested that it was a core of the gameplay experience. It wasn't like the story of. I mean, even companions, really, like this, like say this, the story of Anna. I mean, opinions on Anna and felt for Anna, but I didn't. It wasn't focusing on Anna's journey was not the same as focusing on Cloud's or Tifa's or Barrett's or even Red's. It's just, it wasn't an ongoing. I don't know. Like it was. Those stories weren't told in the context of an experience that I might reasonably myself have had. I am. Its characters are more often interesting than relatable, which is kind of one of the whole themes with Planescape does, and it does it very well. Let's do Fire Emblem Three Houses. Tone is I'm going to go Anime Plus Plus. I think the audience for Fire Emblem Three Houses is younger. I think it's I don't know, is it? To me, it feels like it's that sort of thing. I know it's got some bits where, you know, you won't get too many, what would have back in the day been called PG, in the UK, parental guidance, but like, I don't know what your own local certifications are, but, you know, things meant for children where, you know, one of the good guys is like, kill them, burn them all. Yeah. I think the answer to this is actually absolutely. I just don't think it does it very well. So I guess we're looking at the dialogue there. Let's go back to our core concepts and see. Might as well talk about the storytelling and that's the consideration space. So, as I've said before, I think that the storytelling with Final Fantasy VII is absolutely top tier. It is like one of the only games, period, just one of the only games to use proper cinematography. It's so rare that I don't know why that's so. You know, like even the other Final Fantasies of the period just kind of stopped doing it. I really do like. It would be interesting to know who worked on 7 and like whether they gave up or whether they got replaced. Because, you know, I've talked before about like using the camera as a storytelling device, and obviously I didn't finish 8, not by a long shot, but I didn't notice it in 8. Have we played through? No, we haven't played through 9. Final Fantasy 9 doesn't do it, or very, very infrequently and unaccomplishedly. I guess like some of the other games do it, like with the music. You know, we talk about that element of it. I really do think that the punchy dialogue is brilliantly handled. I just feel it doesn't waste a word, which is just like this is just such a really high value thing. And then in like integrated musical storytelling. When we go to Planescape, I don't think that the storytelling, I don't feel that it's using storytelling devices like Final Fantasy VII is. I think it's relying on its writing. You know, I think there's a certain order of events that happens. I don't think it's woeful. But I don't think it's. You know, the camera isn't involved in the storytelling. It's the same dispassionate camera. The music is ambient to the location or the locale, like, rather than to the emotions of the character, by and large. And I've just said the strength of Final Fantasy VII is its short, punchy dialogue. Christ alive! I mean, like, I don't think there's ever been a game with less short, punchy dialogue than Planescape. You know, it's good. It's brilliantly written. Like, you know, but it's not doing much on the storytelling front in that sense. So not doing much with other devices than writing. I'd say the core concepts and writing doing all the heavy lifting with the narrative, because it is really well done, and there's so many of the concepts are just really good. You know, somebody was talking about it on on some game design subreddit with myself recently, and they were saying that you could argue that a lot of the quality of the writing comes from the setting, which is obviously not created by, you know, Black Isle or the Black Isle. I'm pretty sure it's hard to know with those early ones where Black Isle and Interplay start and stop, and even BioWare to an extent. But the development team and the writing team within the development team, because many of those things owe themselves to the Planescape world, the source books and novella that informed that world. I still think that, like, the Nameless One is a construct, and the characters within are constructs. I think they're really good. You know, I think that it's sometimes it's unfair to compare someone like Cloud Strife with the Nameless One, even though there's certain superficial similarities, I suppose, in terms of the themes, but within the realms of what those two things are doing, that they're both doing that really well. You know, and Planescape does it really, really well. Like from the concept to the execution. Yeah, I think that's great. You know, and this is, as I say, like Planescape's like actual combat. Whenever we're talking about Planescape, we're never talking about the combat, because there's not very much to talk about. You know, it's it feels not quite superfluous, but a lot of it feels like an interlude between the story, the dialogue, there's an almost, it's not a point and click adventure, you can't call it a point and click adventure, but it's sort of, it's almost got that element of like going between the places, speaking to the people is the bits you remember. Whereas if you compare it to, like, I mean, obviously played Baldur's Gate much more recently and many more times, but you know, thinking about the fights in different places, you know, that fight at the top of the Iron Throne, that fight outside the you know, the final, before you go and defeat Sarevok, the fight before that, just outside, you know, even like Mulay, like the opening one, like what that fight means. Whereas in Planescape, you know, to me, you end up referring more to the characters and more to the story. Storytelling. In Fire Emblem Three Houses, it's a bad radio play. it, yeah, I think it's kind of, is patronising a way to put it? Like, I guess that's maybe not, that's more the fucking writing, really. It's just, yeah, there's, like, I guess one of the points of this that, you know, you can sort of compare the two in some respects. Like, it kind of superficially shares the Final Fantasy VII emote system, which I've talked about previously. Like, that's, those characters are incredible. Like in the original models, there, that, yeah, on the surface they're like clunky, janky. There's a couple of, you know, it was a long time before anybody knew whether Reeve had a beard or whether it was a clipping artifact. So, you know, but those characters are really expressive in the few emotes they have. Whereas, like, Final Fantasy VII, sorry, we'll go back through this. I'm saying emotes, and that may mean something different in the 2025 context. What I mean by emotes are character movements that seek to display a character emotion. So when or a character process. So a classic one for Cloud is like he folds his arms and looks up to the ceiling when he's trying to recall something or thinking about something. Like Barrett leans in and shakes his fist when he's like slightly angry, and then he things and bangs his chest when he's extremely angry. And Fire Emblem Three Houses has sort of got a bit of that, but it's like there's so few of them, you know. And like a lot of the time, the characters are sharing them. I guess, you know, that's something else that like sort of comes into it, of how do you make like I was reading a bit on video game art design. We're wandering a bit off topic here, but I think it's useful to talk about. And the book I was reading was saying that one of the critical things with designing a character is like, are they easy to distinguish at a distance? Like, if you've got that character, I say on the horizon, I mean like they're at a certain distance, is it clear who that character is? And part of the reason for that is obviously practically, you know, you want your characters to be distinguishable for, you know, gameplay reasons. Like who is that? Looking awkwardly down at Fallout 2 with its like 6 character models, but also it just means that there's sort of clarity generally. Like it helps to make clear who people are. If when you start getting characters who look the same, it, you know, you're losing something. And one thing that Fire Emblem Three Houses does, somewhat by necessity because of the nature of the game it is, it like you wouldn't want to play that game if it didn't have distinguishable characters. That would be a right pain in the backside. But it also, like, you know, like they are visually clear and striking. Something that is obviously easier in the, you know, anime game paradigm than it is in if you're doing something very realistic. But yeah, something to bear in mind There's a lot of games, like a lot of games where characters end up in uniforms or pseudo uniforms. Clair Obscur, obviously, the characters dress very similarly, and certainly the tones and colours that they work with by default are quite similar. When I think about Final Fantasy 15, you know, like everyone's dressed in black in the melee, and like, yeah, they look different sort of when still, but it's not always easy to see who's who. So yeah. What does that mean for Fallout 2? I mean, well, I mean, it makes the characters less identifiable. I think on our playthrough, there were bits where I didn't realise which person the chosen one was, and thought that, you know, like certainly like in Fallout 1 on that playthrough, is it's like, right, which one's Ian again? Because everyone looks like Ian. I guess we're going space here. Okay, that's gonna be really annoying. Yeah, the storytelling in Fallout 2, I'd say more open world focused. But, well, no, it's just like not generally seeking to foster deeper character feelings on characters. Yeah, again, I'm relying on the writing to do the work. So yeah, can we possibly just move that slightly? Oh, how about we move that up? There we go. These games are all good. I think the games here that flow the best, that have the best player story, are Final Fantasy VII and Fallout 2, and that's why they're in the S tier. Planescape and Three Houses don't have too many they're a bit more of a mishmash. God damn it. You don't you don't necessarily have that same flow. There's a lot of bits that kind of, I think, sort of can take you out of the experience. I think I think when we think about like the dialogue systems, because that was kind of something else to talk about in this video, Fire Emblem, it's got this weird thing of I guess branching narratives was the other, you know, sort of topic at the core of this. Like Fire Emblem, it sits, Three Houses, it sits in A tier on the strength of the combat. I think the combat maybe maybe the setting. I do like the setting and the way it's going for this like ginormous ensemble. It's got a strange thing where there's a couple of really big branching narratives, and I heard someone say, and I can't remember, it might have been Yahtzee, but somebody said that the Japanese have got a much happier relationship with things not being discovered on the first playthrough. Whoever was telling me this was telling this, wherever I read or watched this, if it wasn't in person, they were saying it in reference to Elden Ring, and how Elden Ring has like dungeons with bosses, and in some cases with some quite coolly designed, fairly unique bosses that are just very easily missable. If you blink and you'll miss these sections, at least on your standard playthrough. Three Houses, it's remarkable, and I think to its credit, but your mileage may vary, that you can make choices early on in your first playthrough and be like, well, that's changed everything. We've done a specific, we've done a Blue Lions playthrough, we're doing it, I suppose. I've done it, but you're following through at this point. And Blue Lions is probably the most, well, there's one house particularly where there's a very definite fork in the road. But early on, we've ended up in this situation because we made a simple decision. We're gonna teach Dimitri in his house. But it's quite different if we teach Claude, and as I'm sure you can imagine, quite different if we teach Edelgard. So it's got a huge level of branching narrative there. There's at least 4 really separate endings that have like quite a lot of difference in the maps that you'll go through, and as well as the story that you explore. So that's really good. But when it comes to its dialogue systems, like, it just, I mean, firstly in the writing and storytelling, I in fact, let's absolutely slam this in because it matters. A highly problematic protagonist, main character, because Byleth's a mess. Period in that as well. They are just a mess. There's a lot of, I don't think you see it. It's more visible on certain routes than others, but they can just be an incredibly illogical and unhelpful character that neither seems to have their own motivations, like Cloud Strife. And Cloud's really good for that, because he's got his own motivations, but they are largely easily identifiable in the context that they are described with the player. Most of the time, to me, the original Cloud Strife, I don't know what it says about me, makes sense. I don't feel like I'm fighting against Cloud. I feel like I'm moving. I'm able to explore the world, sort of, with him, and with his sort of help. I think he's an excellent protagonist, and an excellent, when I say an excellent main character, again, go back to the writing. This isn't like, again, it's not Dostoevsky, but it's like this, it has a storytelling device, and you know, yeah, I think he's really good. But Byleth's got all these horrid problems, and it's sort of, it's made worse, in my opinion, by the dialogue choices that we're given. And I think that this is, to me, this is like a real, like a cardinal sin with dialogue. This fluff flavor dialogue. Like, not only does it have no impact, but it also doesn't even really make much difference about with the character. I guess you could say that in some things, yeah, if you say the right words to Geralt and Rhea, then you get like a support thing up. I think Setith as well. I can't remember if you do it with anyone else. But like all the ones I'm remembering right now from the playthrough is, it's like, you know, Byleth, should we do this? And your options are yeah or absolutely. It's like, well, what control was that providing to me? You know, it just seems like, it seems like a pointless piece of engagement, you know. And there's quite a few of the JRPGs like that are on the list that it's almost like there's a loss of confidence or lack of confidence in the writing, that they include bits like that just to make sure you haven't wandered off. Yeah. So I guess, like, again, going back to this, like, you know, the core concepts and things. So these are the sort of broad considerations that I think merit some consideration. Did I just say considerations that merit consideration? If I did, incredible. So I guess, like, to run through them very quickly, you know, what is your tone? Like, is it like anime? Is it serious? Is it, you know, dark? Like, these things are going to affect how you approach your writing and your dialogue and your storytelling. Like, I think like Fallout 1 and 2, they're quite spelling. Yeah, like, that's not really, like, compared to, so, it's, if you're doing something like that that's very much a, you know, bodies are dropping left and right, and, you know, people's, you know, heads are being blown off and whatever, and it's that you don't necessarily, like, I don't think it's as easy a setting or as natural or well trodden a setting for, you know, exploring the sadness of, you know, not being able to tell, you know, the boy at school you like him or whatever. You know, it's like, it's sitting in a different realm. That's not a rule. and there's, I guess, something like, a very mixed tone. Attack on Titan, like, maybe tries to cross manage that, something like that. So it can be done. I'm becoming horribly aware that, like, having seen like 10 animes, I'm about to name. I think I've named 3 of the 10 in this episode. I am perhaps the gentleman doth protest too much. The other point with this, openness of play, like, this is really going to matter in terms of your storytelling, like, because we talked before about this on the channel. If your exploration is non-linear, then you kind of have to make your narrative too. So, like, we've mentioned with I guess to take a couple of different examples here. Obviously, Fallout 2, Baldur's Gate to again, a sort of like slightly lesser extent. These are games where exploration is key to it, and you've already got, like, you've kind of stepped out of the branching pathway part of this. That you've just gone, fully open. It's all going to be, there's just a list of new and different ways of doing everything. And there's a reason why Fallout 2 particularly is a top tier game, and Fallout 1 is again, gave birth to what I think is the most valuable, like, gaming franchise in the world now. Someone said, well, I'm not quite sure how they judge that, but whatever. Yeah. The other example, I always bring it up on the channel with these sort of things, but whenever you talk about, like, openness and narrative, Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild does really well. Tears from the Kingdom attempts the same thing, but, like, runs into a lot of problems because it doesn't have it just doesn't have the writing or storytelling even within those sections that the Breath of the Wild does. The Breath of the Wild's quite clever with it. Well, no, quite clever. Breath of the Wild is not entirely brain dead with it, is perhaps what I mean to say. I think Tears of the Kingdom mucks it up. Breath of the Wild, that one, yeah, rescind that. I do like it, but the point is that, yeah, like, the way that the memory system works, like, you integrate it with the gameplay in such a way that it tells the story in a different way, and that's okay. It won't ever be as good as a curated experience, but it's not bad. But I think some of that in Breath of the Wild, sorry, I know I'm spending a lot of time on something that isn't an RPG, but I think that the level of expectation is low, which makes the story feel better. And also some of the other bits. I mean, like, when I talk about the writing, the storytelling, the narrative, and that, it's basically just talking about Link and Zelda. It's not really any of the other characters. They're pretty, there's not much going on there. In Three Houses, although the world per se, in the way that we normally talk about openness in RPG design, it isn't open. The characters that you can interact with are. So the narratives become non-linear or less linear in that sense. It does mean, unfortunately, in that hybrid system, that, in fact, let's even put this, Fire Emblem Three Houses hybrid system can hello, new colour. Can break its narrative logic. So I guess, like, what I mean to say with that is, there's bits in Fire Emblem that make no sense because sometimes it's really badly done. I don't know if we've done. I think we have done now on the channel. I think we've released the bit where it's Leonie's B tier support, and it just comes in totally illogically and incongruently with the story. And there might be localization issues with that, but it's like, and to use a million more ones, like sometimes, like, horrendous things that happen. Oh no, we were at war, and then like somebody comes up and it's like, Professor, I really enjoy gardening, and it doesn't. It's a bit of a gamble. Again, I think to a certain extent with Fire Emblem, it's with Three Houses. It's the fact that the expectations are low. If you compare, I was recently playing off the channel, and I really don't know if I'm going to ask to cover it on the channel because it's incredibly frustrating. I'm not even sure how I'd do that, but anyway, I was playing Fire Emblem Awakening, and like playing that makes you realise like just how much of a step up for the series in terms of character interactions Three Houses was. Whether or not it plays as well as a game is absolutely up for consideration, but that was definitely a thing. The next one. So, is dialogue a game? I guess let me phrase it another way. Is it something you win? What do I mean by that? Well, like, first off, I want to talk about like the a lot of the modern Obsidian games, and in fact, if we could put, I'm going to call it Pillars. Can I put it? I'm going to put it as PoE, and I'm going to ask that you try and remember that that's not Path of Exile. This is Pillars of Eternity. Actually, Pathfinder did it as well, and Disco Elysium. Elysium EXP for certain dialogue. I really, really, really hate how this is done in Tyranny. Well, like, I mean, it's true of I've included games there that like do it that that we have covered in the tier list. When you get plus 15 experience points if you click this option, and it tells you in advance, and it's like, and the options aren't exclusive, Tyranny does it. Like I've said before, like, to me that game, the dialogue system, it's a game with like it's got a strong core concept, and like I went into that like quite excited by it. I think it's like Tyranny's opening is it's pretty good. You know, I haven't included it in the tier list because once I got out of the opening, it just fucking descends. It just becomes like all the bad bits of Pillars of Eternity again. And one of which, and it seemed to be dialed up even more on Tyranny, was this whole going around being a market researcher. You know, and I really, really think that, you know, Disco Elysium is bad for this. Like it's bad. It does not escape scrutiny here. That like, oh, I want the player to experience this quality world I've written, so I'll tempt them in by offering experience. I just don't think that. To me, it comes across as quite desperate. I think that's completely different from using picking an appropriate dialogue option that would resolve the situation, and then that completes a quest. So something like Fallout 2 has got a couple. I think particularly of something like when Jack in the library, or the power generator thing in NCR, you know, you're trying to talk him down from doing it. Like, it's not. That's something where you're thinking through the conversation options. You know, and it's not perfect. I mean, it's not even terribly complex. I think most people who do it will get it first time. But there is a sense that you're saying the right thing to achieve something, and there is like a failure state. But to just say, you know, tell me more about your VCR, like for 15 experience points, it's just like, I think that's, as I say, cheap and desperate. You know, and there's been, you know, I mean, there's been a storied tradition with that. I mean, I think that there's also like certain books in Morrowind used to give you stat bonuses, skill bonuses probably. What was that? I forget entirely. And it's just like, right, okay, so I'll look through every book I find, will I? And it's just like you just add in like meaningless busy work that's like, I don't think it drags people in. You know, when I think about like the best bits in Disco Elysium, I was already invested. You know, like the whole, you know, that I said before, say it again, like Classier on the Roof is just like, oh, like that, like that's at the end of that act or what have you. I think that's brilliant. I think it's absolutely brilliant. But I wasn't doing that because it was saying you've got 15 experience points because you asked about, I don't know, the history of the region. But like, again, like, this is it's a question of like, do you want to make dialogue a game? Like, something that arguably the early Fallouts do. Well, they definitely do it, but like it's arguable to what extent player agency is involved. A lot of RPGs now will do a talk your way out of it system. With Fallout 1, which is really like one of, certainly the first game I played where you could talk your way out of almost anything. I think I think that's it's a difficult one. I think the first time you play a game that allows you to do that when you haven't played a game where you can do that, I think that's really cool. Cool, I put, I don't know, extra points in intelligence, so I've got the extra option to talk my way out of fighting whatever his name is at the end of the Hall of Trials. But I think it goes a little bit far and becomes sort of simplistic now. And if you're watching this channel, you're thinking about making a role-playing game, or you're thinking about making a game, or maybe you're just interested in this sort of stuff. Like, the chances are you're gonna want to start from your target audience, and those target audience are going to be RPG fans. I don't realistically think that those of us who are having these sort of conversations are, making a new RPG for Nintendo, CD Projekt Red, or like Valve, or something where, like, we're trying to get first-time players. And I think if you're not going for the first-time players, then having, like, I was recently playing The Outer Worlds, and, like, its dialogue system felt like you could just put points into dialogue to win and just get out of stuff, and it's like, well, that's a bad primary gameplay loop. Like that's just bad. You should play the game and accomplish some level of interactive challenge beyond you put points into speech, so now you can talk your way out of everything. It's also, I guess, with this, like, the other thing with this is like, do you want to completely to be clear to the player that it isn't? What I mean by that is, like, there is a school of thought where, like, you keep everything on rails to an extent, and you just make it clear that this is just for flavour. There's no system. You're not going to win anything from it. You are just Commander Shepard being, chirpy or miserable. But Commander Shepard's going to do the thing Commander Shepard's going to do. And then at least you can potentially keep things separate, and potentially you immerse the player by making them not want to game the system. I do think that, like, even something like Fallout 2, I'm not everyone, but, like, I don't think you're not necessarily role-playing the character. It's easy to fall into the trap of just playing those dialogue systems to win, to get the best outcome, which is kind of what I did all the way through and how I habitually play those games. So To what extent that's on me, I don't know. I would go as far as to say I don't think that element of like really role-playing a character is something that just so much easier in tabletop. So I personally think that you do gamify it, but yeah. Let's move on because like time is really ticking with this. It's gone far longer than I thought it would. Obvious pitfalls to avoid, just like pointless choices. We'll go Fire Emblem Three Houses. Sorry, it's a double. In fact, let's go for it. A full 3 colons on one line. How much worse could it read? Screw that up. Things like that. I guess it's just like who have you helped with those? I think you avoid those completely. It's something. This isn't really an obvious pitfall to avoid. I've just realised we've gone this entire thing, and we've talked about all of this. Come back and put it right on the starting page. I don't know what font this is going to come out as. Right. This has been a problem in getting, and it's Telltale's fault. I'm convinced that they just sit on the entire blame of this. Of like, there has become a trend and now a Steam tag, say, in this game your choices matter, as a sales pitch. And I just feel that it's like going into a shoe shop, like going to buy some shoes, and the guy saying, on the till, these include laces. It's like you of course your choices should matter. And it's almost weird that, like, why wouldn't my choices matter? It, like, when I think about, I guess with this, you can tell a linear story, and then like something like Final Fantasy X, which I played relatively recently, and as I recall, didn't have any choices in it. So it's not like, but I wouldn't like that. That doesn't necessarily lose anything for not having that. But if you might just not give me a choice. There are very few choices beyond the exploration itself within the game to the moon. Again, outside of the genre, I think that game's got some of the best writing in any video game. It seems to have become a little bit. A lot of people choosing to hate on that game and like dismiss it, and I think it's I don't think people have missing the point somewhat. So anyway, I guess obvious pitfalls to avoid. I think we are past the dialogue wheel and the parser. Like, I want to give it its full title: the fucking parser. they've not been well received. I think, trying to keep things like organic with that. I think as well, like if you are, and I'm going to be giving a very, very huge side eye at Claire Obscure over this. If you are trying to create emotionally impactful interactions between characters, don't make a number pop up as you do this. Like Claire Obscure, it's got problems with that. I mean, we're way off covering that on the channel, but like, your relationship went up to level 2. It's like, right, okay. I just like, I really feel like if you can't going to do that sort of bonding, I mean, Claire Obscure's bad with that, like the storytelling, which is bad. I guess it's such a really good start as well. I mean, like that's a game. I mean, I don't want to talk about it too much, but like this part, is absolutely spot on. This part is pretty good, and then this part is just woeful. But after, as I say, quite a strong start. But anyway, the other thing. Okay, so value for effort. What do I mean about that? Like, if you're here, you are probably a solo dev or in a very, very small team. This is one of the problems of the branching narrative system. Generally in terms of things, is like, are you going to gain a lot by adding in that extra content? Like, and how much does a small value thing add to that? And I think that, like, when I think about Final Fantasy VII's relationship, okay, yeah, thank you. Well, I don't know why I'd convert a spreadsheet into a table. That's very good of you. Final Fantasy VII relationship mechanic behind the scenes. So what when I'm talking about that, like, I mean the fact that by adding in relatively few extra dialogue options and a very simple incremental system. I mean, I haven't looked at the the base code of the game, but it would be perfectly feasible that, like, that thing was just held in a global variable, and it's just it's very simple. This occurs, and these variables increment or decrement on the basis of that. That was not a hard thing to code, and they didn't even have to put in any markers with it. But by doing that and adding in a handful of extra scenes, you add meaning to all the dialogue choices. I think that's really, really high value. The the systems in Fallout 2, a lot of those dialogue trees, to me, don't feel, maybe the Fallout crews would say differently, but I don't feel that it was, most of them were like really stretching the game that much, you know. Writing those, you know, those systems, it does get a little bit more, like Planescape's got more going on. There's more checks and things going on in Planescape, but then again, it's kind of Planescape's main thing, so that's why that is. I just think, like, we've said it before in several videos on the channel, but like that wonderful quote, just from some dude on r/GameDev, who said that, like, you know, 99% of games of game development is smoke and mirrors, distracting the player for long enough that they don't look behind the curtain. And like, yeah, like if you can do something like that gets through this, that isn't complex to do, you know, why not? I'm really trying to round this up. It's gone on so much longer than I thought it would. I was only expecting this to be about an hour, nearly at the 2-hour mark. The final point is, like, are you, and this again comes back to the, like, both, it comes down to the branching narrative and the writing and the depth. So, okay, that's not quite the thing I was expecting. Let me borrow you. Branches, story depth, and then how else to put it? I guess the player story. That's a bit of a cop-out thing, but yeah. Like, are you wanting to make your game something you play twice? And I think, like, the tier list, unfortunately, we haven't got the whole thing in front, and I'm not going to put this in post. For me, these games are everything in my S tier, and most of these things in the A tier, maybe even all of the things in the A tier, but certainly most of the A tier, and at least as they're listed here, there's a couple of ones in the A tier that are designed to be played more than once. You know, Final Fantasy VII is, I would say, most explicitly designed, even in its singular narrative, to be played more than once in its linear narrative. Baldur's Gate 2, like, not only like offers the various different sort of morality paths, but just from a sheer class composition point of view. Fallout 2, again, like the idea that you'd experience all that in a single playthrough, you know, and right down to Three Houses. Once you start looking at games that are less designed for that, which I think would include, you know, Final Fantasy X, Persona, not Baldur's Gate 3. Baldur's Gate 3 is definitely one, but Morrowind, I don't know. I mean, like, to me, that's, if you're pushing at top tier, then a certain amount of replayability is is kind of implied. But it's okay to make games that aren't designed to be replayed. You know, a single playthrough game. Again, apologies, I haven't got the full tier list up, but I'm sure I could point to loads of games on that tier list that aren't seeking replayability. And if you're not seeking replayability, then you get into like, I know, I mean, I mean, I know I'm outside of the genre. I hate typing this, but like The Walking Dead season 1 Telltale version, like, by the end of the game, the end of the you know, like, by the end of the penultimate episode, I could see the strings. I could see how things worked and how, you know, I wasn't going to play that game a second time. But that's fine. You know, like if you're... And the other thing with this is, like, if you are doing something... Like, again, coming back to the, I suppose, the value for effort thing, is like how can you... Where would I put this? How would you encourage your player to take dialogue seriously? You know, like, what can you do early on to say your choices matter? I think that that's something that, like, if you can put in, again, value for effort. Maybe we'll put it over here. Maybe I'll put it in both. There we go. Like, lazy. No, it's not going to fit. So whatever. What I mean is with that, like, can you early on set up a scenario where, like, oh, a choice I made here in dialogue makes a difference a little later on, and now I know to take dialogue seriously. You finish the opening bombing mission, you bump into Ares, you buy a flower from her. Later on, you're in Seventh Heaven. You can then do something with the flower that you bought that you know you had the option to not buy. So suddenly your decisions are, you know, clearly matter, but not in a fucking stupid, like you know, like fucking, I don't know, Tifa will, sorry, just try the camera, Tifa will remember this, that you did. It's like, no, you don't have to tell that Final Fantasy VII did that by implying it, because the very act of getting to that situation, you know, was achieved through this same system. But I'm going to take Walking Dead off, it's annoying me, sorry. The other question here, though, that does come from the Walking Dead is time dialogue. I think that The Walking Dead's time dialogue where you have to input your dialogue reaction to a timer, and that timer depends on the intensity of the moment. Like, some of them you've got 3 or 4 seconds to, like, you know, put in an answer, or maybe more. And like some of them you've got like 1 second to decide. The Walking Dead manages to do that really, really well, because Lee from The Walking Dead is one of the he's one of the best written protagonists of all time from a dialogue option point of view. Like the way The Walking Dead summarizes his responses, maybe, you know, this might just be me, I suppose, but like certainly I felt this, and the other people I've spoken to about it felt the same. That those summaries, you get like 3 or 4 choices of what to say, and they are summarized by one word. And Lee never ever, even when I was picking those under pressure, behaved incongruously with how I perceived the dialogue option. The dialogue might not say what he literally said, but it summarized it in a word. And I thought, like, you know, that was done brilliantly. To me, as I say, after Fallout and its sequel, like, there's only really The Walking Dead that I've played that's done dialogue, player selection of dialogue any better. And it's not all better. Like obviously, you know, like some of the depth. When I think about speaking with Phyllis in Vault City, and indeed Renesco, like some of those dialogue options are fantastic because of you know, the level of depth that's in there. And The Walking Dead doesn't do that, but at least it's bringing something new to the table. With that said, the first thing is, like, tonally, The Walking Dead is, you know, it's a horror, it's a tonal horror, and in that setting, something that relates to panic is going to be more ingrained in, you know, it's going to be more assonant with the game tone, you know, the game world tone, if it's a panicked, urgent response. Whereas if you're playing really like I mean, look at these games. I mean, like, you know, if you were to have that in, like, Baldur's Gate, the rest of the game's real time with pause. Why the hell why can I give everything else this, but I have the dialogue rushed? Fallout is a slow moving mechanic. You know, the mechanics of the game are slow moving. Final Fantasy VII, it's arguably it's more ATB. It's got perhaps more scope for that, but it doesn't tonally feel like panic isn't really maybe emotionally where the game's going. The ones I think that could have got away with it on this list, Bloodlines absolutely could have got away with it. And Baldur's Gate 3, I can't remember, does it use it? I mean, it's probably been patched like so many times since I actually played it, but does Baldur's Gate 3 use these time dialogues? Can't recall. But I think it probably could get away with them more to an extent. Maybe I'm imagining that because they're already there. I don't know if I've dreamt it of like whether it had like quite slow time dialogues, which seems pointless. You know, like there's got to be, and I think that, yeah, like that. Well, yeah, they just got to be either they have to be relevant to the story that you're telling. But if you are going to do that, then you have to be really, really clear on what, on those, making sure those responses are congruous with what the character's going to say. The massive pitfall, huge, is you do not want to it's one thing for your dialogue to have unforeseen consequences, but don't have your dialogue be something that the player wasn't expecting the character to say. I played Baldur's Gate 3. I'm gonna spoil this. I was playing as a male straight character because imagination, and and I was talking with Gale at camp, and he was talking about magic, a special kind of magic, and I didn't realise, because it just wasn't implied to the way the dialogue was told, that was him offering to sleep with me. And I had said yes to finding out more about this magic because the tone was lost. And while it was amusing as a story, a hilarious misunderstanding, it didn't feel like the like that mistake would have been made by the characters in the context. It felt like there was a waiting on the words, that because you don't hear your player character speak, I couldn't hear. But the writers were imagining me saying it a certain way, and that wasn't clear to me. So I think you always want to be careful with that, but particularly if you're going to use time dialogue where it's the 2 hours 13 minutes and I haven't even scratched the surface on half of these. I think in future this one we might revisit certain of these episodes. They're not one-stops. We're going to come back. The real idea is at some point to do a much more refined version and improve it. But I think with this one particularly, I came in, I didn't even realise know whether I'd have much to talk about on this. To be honest with you, I normally do these because I just want to get a thought out of my head. On this particular one, I must admit I was sort of like oh, maybe I'll make some content, but I wondered if I'd have much to say. As it is, massively overrun, and I haven't even had half of my gin and tonic, so that's the crucial part. What do you think of these things? What do you feel makes for good storytelling, and what do you think about branching narratives? As always, I really do appreciate it when people we've had, in fact, take a moment to go through all that. Several of you have watched some of these videos and have posted in the comments. Thank you so much to everybody who has posted in the comments. It really does. I always said, I don't ask that you like and subscribe. I'm not trying to make a living out of this. But when we have conversations about it, it's just like, it's so cool. Because firstly, it's just nice. It's interesting to talk about. I'm interested. You must be interested too. Let's have a chat. But also, I think it gets a sense when we get talking about these things, that maybe eventually these ideas will filter through. If not for us making games that are successful, then to medium-sized companies. I would love, if somebody take one example of somebody at Obsidian were to see something like this, not necessarily this that I've said, but like if those these ideas and concepts would filter up, what game might they make then? Because sometimes, with the greatest of respect to them, huge company, and definitely, I always feel like I'm being a bit tight on a lot of their games. That they're fighting the good fight in terms of creating, role-playing games, and providing role-playing games for a new generation of players. But I do feel like they can sometimes be in a bit of an echo chamber over certain things, and maybe would might want to think about certain things in a different way. Whatever the weather, please do comment if you've got thoughts on any of this. As always, with this, I'm not intending to get people's backs up with any of this. If you disagree with any of the things on here, especially if you disagree with a view to this page, it's still called Fundamental Problems in the last one, but to considerations or suggestions, or how you think, I'm wrong because of this or this, because it's not going to be perfect. It just isn't. Get a comment in, and otherwise, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.